This is the pharmaphorum podcast. My name's Dominic Tyre, and I'm pharmaphorum's creative and editorial director. In this episode, our news editor, Richard Staines, talks to Richard Francis, who took over as CEO of gene therapy company Purespring Therapeutics earlier this month. Francis was previously CEO of Sandoz, Novartis' generics and biosimilars division, where he led the development of biosimilars and also sat on the Swiss pharma company's executive committee. Francis discusses his motivations for taking the role and why his previous experience stands him in good stead to take this position. He also outlines the challenges facing the gene therapy market and his immediate plans for Purespring. You can find more details of this episode, including a download link for the podcast and more information about other instalments in the series at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast and Stitcher, where you can find and subscribe to it by searching for pharmaphorum.
Richard, welcome to this pharmaphorum podcast. Congratulations on your new role. Please could you tell us about Purespring and what attracted you to this new role?
Yeah, hi Richard. Thanks for giving me the time. So obviously when I was sort of looking at the next opportunity, I sort of set a few criteria down as to things I'd look for. And one of those was around sort of the quality of the science behind the opportunity, because I made up my mind to go sort of to a company that was at its sort of formation, which we can talk a bit about later why. But so the quality of the science, and then could it create a platform? And then the people behind it, i.e. Syncona. So when I looked at Purespring and spoke to Professor Salim and spoke to the Syncona team, I was really blown away by the quality of the science that had been looked into, and particularly the work that Professor Salim has done at Bristol. I think he's really world-renowned on looking at kidney diseases, in particular podocytes and how they play in some of those diseases. So I thought the science was excellent. And as I asked around about it, did my due diligence, that was confirmed. And then I sort of, platform, obviously gene therapy and the potential here in targeting the kidney. There are so many diseases that can emanate from the kidney that the potential from a platform point of view is significant. And I think that's important from two aspects. One, it just de-risks in a way, because you can go after different indications and different diseases. But also it gives you opportunity to make a bigger impact, which is obviously really appealing. So it had a platform, which obviously you have to manage early on in a company and not get distracted. And then the final thing was, who's behind it? And it's obviously Syncona. And so, in speaking to the team at Syncona, I was really impressed by, one, obviously the deep knowledge and legacy they have in gene therapy. Obviously, they've started multiple companies. And so, when they pick the next one and they put their biggest investment, and it's a sizable investment they've made in Purespring, you sort of know that they've done a lot of due diligence, they've got a lot of experience, and they're sort of putting their money where their beliefs are. And, on that sort of, note, it's probably not one that I suppose I've talked about a lot with Syncona, but because they've done a lot in gene therapy, I like to think that Purespring has a bit of a head start. We're not starting from a standing start. We can learn from a lot of things they've done and maybe not make some of the mistakes that they've learned in their past, and maybe that can help accelerate us and propel us forward a bit quicker. So those are the three criteria I laid out. And then the final thing, which is actually important for me, is I really like all the people who are involved in it, from the founders, the people in Bristol, to the people in Syncona I'm working with. And I think that's really important when you're starting out on a new journey, which is going to be quite interesting and have its ups and downs. And so there's a real connection there. So hopefully that answers that question, Richard.
Absolutely. And it does lead me on nicely to question number two, which is what have you learned in your career so far that stands you in good stead to lead a gene therapy company?
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting question, because it's sort of, there's so much that as you go through a career, you learn from the people you work with, the mistakes you make, the successes you have. But I think I sort of boil it down to a few key areas again. And one of those is, and it's particularly relevant and pertinent now, is I think you really need to have innovation now. I think the market, both the reimbursement market, the capital markets, everybody demands innovation. Incremental improvements are just not really accepted by any of those areas. And so it's got to be innovative. And, I've learned that through my time in biotech at Biogen. Some of the drugs we brought forward there were very innovative and groundbreaking. To some of the stuff at Sandoz, bringing biosimilars through into a world that was, I think had question marks around them, and then seeing the huge uptake that's had, but knowing that wasn't straightforward, but the value proposition was and clearly is, and I think that's why they've done well. So I think innovation and really making sure you focus on an unmet need is critical. And I've learned that. And you can sidestep that and try and forget that, but I think it will punish you. And then the others, I think, are maybe going to sound a bit corny, but I passionately believe in. One is it's all about people. I think, when I look back on all the areas I've been involved in and some of the teams I've been successful with and some of the challenges and failures we've had, it'll always come back to the people and the quality of the people you work with. And so I think for me, and it's going to be a key at Purespring, is making sure we hire the very best people. I think that is really important. As much as I do think Purespring's ahead when it comes to gene therapy and targeting the kidney, I'm sure other people will follow. And what's going to keep us ahead is the people and the quality of the people we hire and the culture we build around them. So I do think people are critical. And then culture. I mean, I've moved around a couple of companies, not many, and I've seen companies change their culture. But I think if you get hiring people right, the next thing you can lay on top of that to make it very successful, maybe even slow it down, is adding the right culture or maybe not the right culture. And so I think making sure that we surround people in Purespring with the right culture. And I saw that throughout my career, and I learned the value of that. And it's talked about a lot, but it's something I think you have to be quite focused on to make sure it's the right culture. But I hope that Purespring will have a culture that's, I think, very inclusive, courageous, fast-moving, ambitious, as in a bit of a dreamer, like what is possible. I think we'll shoot for the stars and deal with failure along the way wherever that happens, but do it courageously. But I do think if you hire people, it's really important to give them the platform to share what they're capable of. Make sure that's a flat structure, a lean structure, and really allows them to I think, share their capabilities. So I do think that's something which is going to be important, and I've learned that along the way. And I think I wasn't a believer in culture back in my 20s, but I'm a firm and passionate believer now. And then the final thing is, and I saw this a bit as the companies are part of got bigger and bigger, it's the ability to stay focused. And, I think sometimes organizations, as they get bigger, they start off a line, but sometimes they can lose that. And I think, the ambition with Purespring is obviously at the start, alignment should be straightforward and staying really focused on what we're trying to achieve. And that way, all the other stuff that can get lost in the day-to-day of many companies, be it the bureaucracy, the politics, all those other things, we won't have. It'll be focused on the goal of what we're trying to achieve and getting these products to the market, to the patients as soon as possible. And I think we've seen that small companies can do that a bit easier. And that's why I think there's been this raft of successful small companies over the last 5 to 6 years. And so I think those are things I've learned. All sound very simple, Richard, but I know through experience you've got to work hard to make sure you do get the right people, you do have the right culture, do stay true to the science and the high bar you set. And, you make sure, particularly when you have a platform, you don't get distracted and you do stay focused.
So what are the challenges you'll need to overcome in the gene therapy market? And I think you've kind of already alluded to sort of how you've overcome challenges in biosimilars and the new therapeutic kind of pathway there. So yes, please tell me about that.
Yeah, and I think it's evolving. So I think as much as you can put together some great plans in gene therapy, things are going to change, particularly as we focus on the kidney. I think it's, and we're going to be the real explorers in that area. I think, things won't always go according to plan. And I think we've got to be able to adapt and pivot and learn from that. And that's a cultural aspect as well as a capability aspect. But I think some of the challenges that, I've seen and I've learned from Syncona as I've talked to them, are some fundamentals that you've seen out there in the market, around manufacturing capability, capacity. And that's something which Purespring is going to be, focused very heavily on right from the start. So, that's going to be a functional capability we're going to build immediately and make sure we do have that manufacturing capability and competency. I think obviously there are the question marks, which I'm sure you write about, and there are still topics of conversation which are around, how do you approach pricing in potentially curative therapies? And what does that mean for societies and healthcare systems? And I think that's, once again, I think you've got to be adaptive, realistic about the value proposition you're bringing forward, and create new ways of maybe not just pricing things, but having payments and contracts with the different healthcare systems that would be looking to buy these products. But I think, then there are some of the more basic ones around, the targeting, how specific can the targeting be of the therapy? What are the challenges around the dosing, the toxicity? But I think those are well documented. But once again, I think we're going into this with our eyes wide open. And I think we've learned a lot already from the team we've assembled. And they've got a lot of experience. And I think there's a lot of companies that have gone before us, maybe, targeting different organs, but I think we've learned from that. And I think that legacy of knowledge stands us in good stead. But it's not going to be straightforward, but I don't think being an innovator is, but I think we've got all the capabilities to overcome the challenges that I see in front of us. But time will tell, but I'm very optimistic.
And just final question, what are your immediate plans in the role?
Yeah, that's sort of 100-day. Well, as I actually don't start until the 1st of February, I suppose as soon as I say this, the Syncona guys may listen to it and start to draft up a list of meetings immediately. So I should be careful. But I think in all seriousness, I think obviously getting to really understand and know the team, particularly working with Professor Salim and Bristol, is going to be important to build those relationships, but also to focus on building the team out at Purespring. As I said before, and I stand by what I said, I think it's trying to make sure we bring the right people into the company who have the right capabilities, but also the right cultural fit. That's no easy task. Talent is a rarity, and finding it and then attracting it, I think, takes time and effort, but I'll be focused on that. And then I think it's always key for a company, any company, but particularly one at its inception, to have a clear strategy of what it's trying to achieve. What is our North Star? What do we want to become? And I know, when I talk to the team we have in Syncona, we want to make Purespring a company that takes the products right the way through to commercialization and do that in multiple diseases. But I think we've got to have a good, clear idea of how we do that. So building that plan in detail with the team is going to be important. But I think that's as much as I put on my list. I think it's going to have to be adapted as I get my feet under the table. Although I suppose I'll be getting my feet virtually under the table with the COVID situation as it stands right now.
Great, thanks so much, Richard. That's great to talk to you.
Thanks, Richard. I really appreciate your time.
And that concludes episode 29 of the pharmaphorum podcast and Richard Staines' chat to Richard Francis from the gene therapy company Purespring Therapeutics. You can find more details of this episode, including a download link for the podcast and information about other instalments in the series at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast and Stitcher, where you can find and subscribe to it by searching for pharmaphorum. And don't forget to visit our website to sign up for daily or weekly email, pharmaceutical news and analysis bulletins. And follow us on Twitter, where we are at pharmaphorum.